It's pretty common that in recovery, whether it be on social media or in person or at our EMS weekends, people will ask me, Samuel, what does recovery work consist of? Or what's a good explanation of the recovery work that we should be doing? And I usually come to the point where I share with people there's three different recoveries that absolutely have to be addressed if you're going to find healing from infidelity. There's your recovery, there's your spouse's recovery, and then there is the recovery of the marriage. Ultimately, if those three recoveries aren't addressed, and if those three recoveries aren't cared for, typically the couple will end up stuck, they'll end up broken down, they'll end up feeling paralyzed, and oftentimes it's like they feel like they're drowning, but they don't know why. They're getting help, typically, help of some form, some nature, but it's not clicking, and there isn't a sense of oneness, and they typically feel, more than anything, they feel stuck and they feel paralyzed. And so today I want to explain some of the pitfalls that happen when you don't address all three recoveries. One of the struggles that a couple will experience in recovery is if they only focus on your recovery, what happens is you feel frustrated because you're doing this work, whether it be unfaithful or whether it be betrayed. You're working on yourself. You're caring for yourself. You're doing what you need to do under maybe the care of an expert or going through a course on our website or just working on your own recovery. The problem is if your spouse or partner is not working on their recovery, you can feel yourself start to feel resentment, frustration, just an overwhelming sense of anger because you feel like you're doing all the work. You feel like you're the only one working, like you're shouldering the load of recovery, and it really takes two to see a marriage restored. You see, it's very common for the unfaithful to feel like, okay, I'm doing recovery work, I'm kind of getting the crap beat out of me, but that's okay because I caused this. I'm going to groups, or I'm meeting with my therapist, or I'm doing a course online, or all these different things. And then they can sit back and kind of feel, but, you know, my betrayed spouse or partner won't do any work. And they don't seem to want to take part in any of the things that I'm doing. And so the unfaithful gets incredibly frustrated. The next scenario is very common, not the most common, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but probably the second most common is the experience where the betrayed spouse is doing a ton of work. They're studying, they're reading, they're finding counselors, they're taking the initiative to find good help, and they are seemingly carrying the load of recovery, but the unfaithful refuses to do any work or continues to drag their feet to do work at all, or is just kind of checking boxes, going through the motions. And what happens is the betrayed feels completely disrespected because they didn't bring this upon the marriage. They are the victim, and the victim is having to shoulder the load or actually lead recovery. And it really becomes not just frustrating but disorienting because they kind of feel like, wait a minute, like I didn't do this. Why am I having to lead? Why am I having to find therapists or look for programs or get you to do something like the free boot camp? And there is a moment that things start to kind of click, and now you're dealing with incredible amounts of bitterness and resentment and rage because you didn't ask for this. You didn't cause this, but yet you, the betrayed, are having to lead recovery efforts. And I will tell you, unfaithful, it's probably one of the most infuriating things for a betrayed spouse to go through outside of maybe relapse or drip feeding because they didn't cause this and now they are having to heal it and they absolutely feel hopeless. I want to identify something that the betrayed feels, and I certainly would love feedback on this, whether it be on YouTube or affairrecovery.com or even on Twitter. What's very common is a betrayed spouse feels abandoned. They feel like, wait a minute, I have been left for dead. You, the unfaithful, dropped this nuclear bomb into our situation, And now I'm left holding the bag. And so, unfaithful, you may be kind of wondering, look, why can't we just move on, move past it, stop dwelling in the past? That's never going to work. Those statements, those cliches, that mental approach, that heart approach is always going to fail. Because if you're not willing to do and work your recovery work, your betrayed spouse feels abandoned. They feel left for dead. They literally feel like you set off a bomb, walked away, and they are the ones that have suffered the nuclear radioactivity of your choices, and now you won't do any work to help them heal. It gives them no hope for the future, no hope that you will change, no hope that you will ever be safe again. The third scenario is the most common scenario, and that is when the recovery of the marriage is the chief concern, the number one concern, but yet there's no emphasis on the recovery of the unfaithful or the recovery of the betrayed. What happens is a couple experiences infidelity, and so they launch out into general marriage counseling, or maybe just even, expert marriage counseling, but the problem is they haven't addressed the infidelity. And so what happens is inherently the betrayed spouse feels like, well, wait a minute, I'm not to blame for your affair. But yet, you can't argue with what they're feeling, because inherent within that is the fact that you are only addressing one recovery. You're putting the cart before the horse, as they say. And the betrayed feels like, oh, so we're going to launch into the dissatisfaction of the unfaithful, or we're going to launch into the problems with the marriage. However, there was two people in this marriage. We both had frustrations and only one cheated, but now we're going to focus on the marriage instead of focusing on the unfaithful's recovery and the betrayed's recovery. As we say in Texas, that dog don't hunt. It doesn't work that way. You as an unfaithful may say, but that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just working on the marriage. It doesn't work. Until you can address simultaneously the recovery of the unfaithful, the recovery of the betrayed, and also the recovery of the marriage, you're never really going to get where you want to get. Now, I will throw out a caveat. There are moments when a spouse is unsafe. It could be unsafe because the betrayed is dealing with rage or PTSD and can't really control it at the time. It could be that the unfaithful is unsafe because they won't get help, they won't stop acting out, they won't end things with their affair partner. In those scenarios, you absolutely have to say, look, we can't work on the marriage until this person works on their recovery. Now, getting back to this scenario, when you start to focus on the recovery of the marriage too soon, I promise you, more times than not, it ends in incredible frustration and paralysis because you're trying to talk about marital issues, but you haven't addressed the infidelity. Or, now this is going to be a little tough, so betrayed spouses, sit tight for this. If the unfaithful doesn't feel like the betrayed is at least willing to have open and honest discussions about their recovery, then the unfaithful typically is very reticent, very hesitant to get into marital conversations. So you can see this Bermuda Triangle of recoveries that have to be addressed the right way. And when they are not addressed the right way, there is a guaranteed amount of frustration and paralysis that sets in, and that's where people begin to reevaluate. Is it even worth it? Should I even pursue recovery? I promise you, if you can get the right help and get the right process, and if both spouses will commit to that process, you can approach all three recoveries in a way that is life-changing, is marriage-saving, and will give you what you're so desperately looking for, which is fulfillment, which is peace of mind, and personal and marital restoration.